Why student pilot quit? Figure out beforehand that why student pilots quit flying without getting a certificate. That way, you will realize why it is not uncommon for student pilots to quit and never get a license. So that you can prepare for the obstacles and struggles you may face, and you will not struggle to accomplish your pilot license. Hence, I have shared a list of obstacles you may not have expected and how to prevent all those from getting your first pilot license. 1. Lack of funding. Not having enough money is the first and foremost problem why student pilots quit. The number of student pilot dropout rates is very high because most students start flying without knowing how much money is required. To complete your flight training, you need a sufficient amount of money. It is best to have another 30% extra on top of your pilot course cost. Having extra money over the adequate fund will reduce your chances of dropping out. I think the problem is how the flight training schools do their marketing. Flight training schools will give you a flight training course fee depending on the minimum hours required to fly. They do this so that the pilot students will enroll quicker. As a newbie in the industry, you may not know how flight schools promote to get more students. They will not tell you about the extra money you might have to pay if you require more flying hours to acquire your license. So flying more hours means you have to spend additional for the extra hours. Apart from that, there are many other things you need to buy to complete your flight training. Such as books that you have to study and become a better pilot. Several other supplies are necessary even to get your private pilot license. After calculating the cost of flight training and other associated costs, you must allocate some extra to fund until you get the licenses. Having that extra funding will reduce your struggles and stop you from quitting flight training. 2. Lack of structured training. If you do not have structured training, then there is a chance of you getting annoyed and quitting. If you do not prepare enough before your flight and do not know what to learn, you will find your training difficult. Going for a flight without knowing what lessons to learn today and what to expect, your learning process will be longer. As a student pilot, you may want to give up on flight training encountering unexpected interruptions. Now, as you can see, not having structured training is also going to stress your funding. Without proper lessons, you will have to repeat a similar task in flight training again and again. As a result, you will fly more hours stressing your bank balance. I have seen several pilot students not knowing what to expect and learn from the flight, and they got their first solo flight at 60 hours. Flying unnecessary extra hours may also be the fault of flight instructors where their teaching method is not so good. Hence the student pilot quit. 3. Student and instructor problems. You may already know by now that not having a structured plan in the student pilot's training can cause delays in acquiring a pilot license. But not having a friendly instructor can damage your flight training massively. Why is that? If you and your flight instructor lack understanding of each other, your flight training period will be affected. Having a good relationship and communication with your flight instructor regarding all the problems you face is crucial. A good flight instructor will do his best to teach his student pilot all flying skills necessary. If you have difficulty learning a flight maneuver, you must say that to your flight instructor, who will repeat the lesson. Another problem is that flying with different flight instructors often. Now some say that flying with different instructors is not the best idea. Not unless you get your first solo flight. Every flight instructor has a different method of teaching. A new pilot student will overwhelm himself with the lessons, and as a result, the flight training period will be longer. If the flight training school assigns a new flight instructor every time you go for your flight training, it is time that you must consult with the chief flight instructor of your school and request for only one flight instructor. 4. Lack of time and dedication. If a student pilot is not committed to acquiring their first pilot license, they will eventually drop out. The reasoning you may not have enough time or you have another job to do apart from getting your pilot license can be the cause of quitting pilot training. If you cannot fly regularly and decide to fly every once in a while, you will have to repeat your flying lessons. Repeating flying lessons can get boring, and you will find yourself not interested in getting your license anymore. So commit yourself to flight training until you get your pilot license. Find ways to keep your flights exciting and fun. And that will help you stay committed to your training. 5. Self-doubt. Student pilots are often overwhelmed with lessons and think they cannot make it until the end. I have seen students struggle to get their first solo flight and have flown extra hours. That is why they start to doubt themselves. The thing is, no matter what happens, you must not doubt yourself. Because sooner or later, you will get your first solo flight. Don't doubt yourself just because the next student got his solo before you. New pilot students sometimes fail to perfect a maneuver and begin to doubt themselves. They think flying is not actually for them. But that is why you have a flight instructor to instruct you to become a better pilot. Never doubt yourself just because of 1 or 2 bad landings. Bad landings are part of the game. That's how a student pilot learns. 6. Lack of motivation. 1 or 2 bad landings can lower your confidence. Your flight instructor screaming at you to improve your landings can demotivate you tremendously. When I was a student pilot, my instructor screamed at me because I did not make a good landing, as well as I couldn't answer a few questions that he asked me. As a new student pilot, I struggled to maintain my altitude in the air and could not answer the question inside the cockpit, demotivated to fly ever again. So I took a short break from flying. I was so dry of motivation that I did not want to go for flight training again. Yet I went back to flying after 2 weeks, and this time I studied my books. And ready to answer all the questions. Eventually, my flying skills became better, and I got my commercial pilot license. Like everything in life, there will be the phase during your flight training where you may lack motivation. But you cannot allow that to stop you from flying. There are ways to motivate yourself. Motivate yourself by talking to other pilots. Watch videos on YouTube to grasp new techniques. Study your aviation books. Work hard and get back to flying. You cannot be that student who quit flying before getting the pilot license. 7. Have to study harder than expected. Many pilot students intend to become pilots because they think flying doesn't require studying a lot. They believe learning how to maneuver an airplane is sufficient. However, you may fail to maneuver the aircraft properly because you did not pay attention during your ground schooling. Not knowing the basics required for a good traffic pattern and failure to land the aircraft smoothly can be why you cannot work hard enough with your books. So many students get into flying, anticipating they do not have to study, but once they realize they have to work hard and explore so much to get their license, they give up. So don't confuse yourself. You will have to work hard to become a pilot. Becoming a pilot is a considerable responsibility, hence you need to be prepared for all kinds of situations. Having the knowledge and implementing them as necessary during flight is vital. Therefore, do not get into flying with the thoughts that you can study less and get your pilot license. 8. You are likely to quit training halfway if you don't have clear aims in aviation. Students who do not understand why did they start flying in the first place tend to quit flying. Do student pilots need to have a clear set of goals? Why do they want their license? Do they want to fly an airplane with friends and family, or do they want to pilot aircraft with hundreds of passengers? With that goal in mind, staying focused on achieving that, you have to continue your flight training. Many students get so overwhelmed with the training lessons they forget why did they start flying in the first place. Some may have started flying simply for the fun of it or to enjoy the flight. Others may have a different dream. Having a clear set of priorities and goals in your mind will prevent you from dropping out of your flight training. 9. Are you selecting the right flight school? Being in a flight school that is not having enough fleet and training quality is not good can be the reason for student pilot dropout. I also meant that choosing a flight school with cheaper flight training costs is not always the best option by saying the wrong flight school. A flight school with cheaper flight training costs may also have not well-maintained aircraft, inexperienced instructors, and poor ground schooling syllabus. All these combined can be a horrendous experience for a student pilot. And the student pilot will stop flying because of the experience he is having in the school. A not well-maintained school will be slower in processing documents for you, too, which will result in a more extended training period. So before you enroll in any flight school, you must talk to the previous student pilots of the school and ask them their experience with the institute. Talk to the flight instructors there and figure out whether they are friendly or not. Take a stroll in the general aviation area and ask other companies in general aviation regarding the records of that flight training school you are willing to enroll. 10. Medical issues. Having good health is vital for student pilots. Before even you start your flight training, it is crucial to do some medical checkups. Find yourself medically fit to become a pilot. If you are not medically fit to become a pilot, you must not start your flight training. Without assurance from an aviation medical examiner, you will not get a medical certificate to become a pilot. So consulting an aviation medical examiner and figuring out how to solve all the medical issues is the best possible thing. Once you know that you are physically and mentally fit to get your first pilot license, you can start your pilot training. Do not let minor medical issues stop you from getting your pilot license, which sadly is a common concern among new student pilots. On the other hand, many people stop flying after feeling airsick during their orientation flight. Because as you get used to flying in the air, you will not be airsick anymore. Airsickness can cause many student pilots to quit immediately after their first flight. Understanding that you will not be airsick after a few more flights can stop you from dropping out of flight training. This way, you can prevent yourself from dropping out of pilot training and acquiring a pilot license.